FS Securities, education and information firm on the Gold Coast in Queensland, Australia. And every Monday morning I go through what happened globally around the world and try to forecast what we may see these coming weeks. I'll show you how investors and traders can make money on our stock market. I'll show you what is hot and what is not. And by the way, if you have any particular feedback you would like to give us, we would really appreciate to hear from you. Well, overnight on Saturday morning, we've seen that the Dow was up nearly 2%, as you can see here. That's the day before. It also had 2 beautiful days going up. And the Nasdaq, by the way, has actually gone higher and higher, almost recovering all the losses in 2020. It's very close to 9,121. And the S&P 500 was up by 48 points and 32 points higher the day before. In Europe, the StoXX 50 index, which comprises most major European markets, was up nearly 1%. In London, the FTSE was up 1.4%. In Germany, the DAX was up 1.3%. These are all daily increases. And the Nikkei was up 2.5%. In China, the Shanghai was up 1%. And our market on Friday, we were up 27 points, 0.5% to 5,391. The day before, we lost 20 points. Gold, as a matter of interest, lost $11 on Saturday morning. Was trading at 1,713 US per ounce. And silver had a good day on Friday. It was up 1.2%, up 19 cents, trading around $15.80. Copper was up, and Brent oil was up nearly 5%, got up to nearly 31 US per barrel. Remember, not so long ago it was below 20. Crude oil, $24.74 US per barrel. And as a matter of interest, soybeans had a good day on Friday, was up 0.7%, $6 per bushel, up to 850. But we hear that China is playing games with America and they're buying more soybeans from Brazil. The Australian dollar, 65.3 US, 60.26 euro cents, and 0.52 British pence. Looking at what happened over the last 2 weeks, we like to actually compare what's the change in 1 week, and then we like to put the 2 weeks together and see if the rise last week is a confirmation of what happened the week before. So, over the full week and from around the globe, we start with the Dow Jones Industrial Average Index, which makes up the top 30 US stocks, which had a weekly rise, 2.56%, 607 points. However, when you look at the last 2 weeks together, you find that obviously the week before was actually a loss, because when you put the 2 weeks together, it's below last week's gain. 2 weeks together, 2.34%, so a small loss 2 weeks ago. But anyway, that's the performance over 2 weeks. The Nasdaq, beautiful 5.64% 2 weeks in a row. And the S&P 500, which is the broader index, was up 3.3%. You can see that 2 weeks ago we had a slightly negative week, and last week was a good week, and you put the 2 weeks together, we're still very positive. Volatility, which is actually shows how volatile the market, was nearly 25% last week. The Australian dollar, it dropped, the US dollar, it dropped 0.5%. That's the basket of currencies. The Australian dollar did very well 2 weeks in a row, 1.7 last week, and another extra 1.3% the week before. Okay, in terms of commodities, gold on Saturday was trading at 1,705 approximately US per ounce. That is actually over 2 weeks a drop of nearly 41 US dollars per ounce. However, silver had a good 2 weeks together. It was a major win last week of 4.7 over 2 weeks, 2.74% rise. West Texas crude oil, 43% rise over the last 2 weeks. So crude oil is coming back, very good, strong trend. Now, in terms of other currencies, if you're interested, all you have to do is call us. Okay, now in terms of our mechanical system that we have designed over the last 25 years, it's based on technical analysis that include 8 technical indicators across 2 time frames. So when we look at the investor, we look at the monthly and the weekly, and when we look at the traders, we look at the weekly and the daily, and depends on whether you are a conservative trader, aggressive trader, very aggressive trader. So we have 4 different strategies on the weekly and then on the daily as well. You need to have confirmation between the weekly and the daily for the confirmation to confirm the trend. For instance, the Nasdaq, we've been 2 Saturdays ago, we were very strongly bullish, which was confirmed on Saturday morning, the last Saturday morning. And when you go across here, the daily, you find this is actually Wednesday, Thursday and Friday mornings, all confirm the particular trend. And when you look at gold, we were actually bearish for the very aggressive trader 2 weeks ago. That is last Saturday. This is actually what we're going to trade this week, provided the daily confirms the weekly. But just to confirm our forecast during last week, we go back 2 Saturdays ago, and that's what we said. Silver was very bearish 2 Saturdays ago, and then look, on Wednesday we started to change neutral and then more bearish across all investors and traders, and then on Friday we turned it into bullish, which by the way it was confirmed on Saturday. Again, I just want to show you that these are what we have weekly and daily, and together we start to form a forecast for this coming week. Of course, you know, there are some indicators that are lagging and may take a day or 2 or even a week before they form. However, if you have a confirmation between the weekly and the daily on the start of the week, we can actually start to look at those trades and see if we can go into bullish, bearish or neutral. Now looking at the chart, that's the weekly chart for the Dow. Remember, it was up, sorry, that's the ASX 200. And when we look at the ASX 200, we had 7,200, our peak, probably, you know, going back to perhaps prior to the coronavirus. However, during the coronavirus, we had a major drop in February, March, and we dropped to 4,400. And then we can see that our index, that is the ASX 200, managed to recover nearly 38%, which is the Fibonacci retracement, and hasn't been able to cross over. Is it going to cross over and go up to the 50% retracement, which is the Gann retracement? Obviously, it's time to tell. If you look at the weekly major leading indicator, which is the stochastic, we were slightly bearish on the stochastic and we were bearish on the parabolic stop and reverse. These are the 2 most leading indicators. However, when you go on to the daily, you'll find we've got the parabolic stop and reverse bullish, and the stochastic actually converging onto the red, which is actually showing if the red is above the blue, we are bearish. If the blue is above the red, we are bullish. However, it's converging and almost about to cross over. So that is actually more or less in neutral. So if you want to trade the ASX 200, you are in a neutral situation. Apart from the parabolic stop and reverse and the stochastic, we have long-term indicators here, the 200-day moving average, the 100-day moving average, and the 50. And by the way, all those candles happen to be below the 50, which really shows we are in a bearish trend. And the 50 is below the 100, the 100 is below the 200. That's also an indication of the bearish trend. Looking at our mechanical system, before we go down to the mechanical system, the 2-week movement in our market, the Australian market, these are the sectors. You can see we had last week a very good week. The ASX 200 was up 2.8%, and obviously the week before it wasn't really a major increase. So 2.8% stable over 2 weeks. Most of the gain happened in last week. Our market gauge, which is the ASX 200, is made up to a great extent by the financial and the material sectors. When both sectors are up or down strongly, the market reacts accordingly. Last week the financial sector was up 1.7%. It was up 2.1% over the last 2 weeks. Material sector was up 4.3% last week and 1.9% over 2 weeks. So obviously there were actually for the material sector was a loss the week before, but that actually managed to have a good gain last week of 4.3%. However, the 2 weeks together you only have 1.9% increase, and of course that has affected our ASX 200. Financial was good for over 2 weeks, and the material sectors good last week but bad 2 weeks before. However, still a gain over 2 weeks. And what you can see here, the ASX 200 was up 2.8% last week, and again not really a change. Gain in the financial, loss in the materials, and really no change at all between 1 week and 2 weeks. In terms of the top stocks that we have here, you have the red, which means negative, and amongst the negative, QBE had the worst week, 3.3% drop last week, and that also confirms the week before was also another loss, a small loss. 2 weeks together we have 4.2% loss over the last 2 weeks. So we're going to look at QBE and see whether it's worth going bearish on QBE this morning. Now in terms of gain, you can see here amongst all these companies, 9.8% Newcrest Mines had a good week last week. However, the week before wasn't really a very good week, because when you put them together, the 2 weeks together, we were still down 3.2%. And remember I told you that the sector, look at the gold sector, was up 10-11% and was now nearly down 0.1%. On the commodity, we've seen 40% drop over 2 weeks US per ounce, remember? Okay, so again you can see here the best stock is Newcrest Mine last week, and Macquarie Bank had 8.5% increase last week and confirms another increase the week before. 2 weeks together we have nearly 11%. Bramble over 2 weeks we were down 11%. And Worley we have 24% increase over 2 weeks. Again, it's worth looking at Worley. And of course the oil sector, we've got Santos and Woodside Petroleum, both had 2 good weeks. Again, is it possible that the crude oil will continue to go higher? Again, we'll have to wait and see. Now, in terms of our mechanical system, the sectors, we can see here that the sectors, 2 Saturdays ago, we said the ASX 50, the top 50, we were bearish. However, we're still bearish on Saturday morning, but however, we started to go neutral for the very aggressive and the aggressive trader and the conservative trader. But we continue to be bearish for the investor, the long-term investor. In terms of the sector of gold, on Saturday morning we are still strong on gold, even though we've seen a drop. So again, remember, there are some lagging indicators and there are some leading indicators. We do this every day and we do this every week. So once we have a trend showing here at the end of the week, that remains stable. We can't really change it until the end of this week. However, the daily, of course, we can change that every day depending on what we see in the market every day. And what we do, we need to have a trend or a signal from the weekly, and that signal needs to be confirmed every single day of the week to be able to continue to trade. So what happens if we are bullish on Saturday, bullish on Monday, we trade on a bullish say on Monday, and then on Wednesday in the middle of the week that changes to neutral. So then if you are a very aggressive trader, you most likely need to take some money out. If you are an investor, obviously you don't change. The investor is very dormant because it relies on the monthly and the weekly. So once you have a confirmation for the investor in the beginning of the week, that is not going to change during the week. Okay, so that is the principle behind it. We also like, before that, that's actually the trend for the stock. So BHP, we were bearish 2 Saturdays ago and continue to be bearish this Saturday, which is Monday morning, our time, today. And look, every day BHP continues to be bearish. So will you trade BHP this morning on the bearish side? Again, what we need to do beyond these signals, we also like to look at resistance and support. If we are reaching a point where a resistance was met weeks or months before, that could also be a resistance for this coming week, and we have to be very careful as well. We also look at Fibonacci retracement and the Gann retracement. So these are only showing you a starting point. We also look at the fundamental. We look at the value of the company and what is the value is compared to the actual price. PE ratio is important. Directors' involvement, buying or selling their own shares is important. So this is not sacrosanct. Remember that it's a helping hand to what you trade on a daily basis. Remember, and it depends on what you are. Are you an investor, or are you a conservative trader, or aggressive trader, or very aggressive trader? You need to understand what it means to have a risk appetite and how much you're able to afford to lose money and not having to slash your wrist. So the investor is the long term, is there on the long term. However, the very aggressive trade in and out, maybe 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times during the week. Another thing we look at is the volume and advances versus decline on a daily basis. This is advances over declines on a weekly, and these are the daily. And you can see here the last 2 weeks we had more advances than declines. And the volume, by the way, has been dropping. So it tells you that the market is now more or less is not taking very aggressive buy or very aggressive sell. They actually trading the market instead of investing into the market. On Saturday morning, we've seen that these were the companies that had high activity. Zip was up 14.3%. Flight Centre was 8.1%. We are, by the way, trading Flight Centre for some people on the CFDs. Harvey Norman had 6.7%. Macquarie Bank had a good week last week, as we've seen, and so is Wesfarmers. Another thing we look at is also stocks that have traded above their average volume. We start with the weekly. What we see here, this is actually the average weekly volume. And we can see, for instance, over last week, this company, Vicinity Centres, had a 2% above its average volume. Weekly average volume is about 26 million transactions, well, last week was slightly above it, and the price was up by 5.2%. Not a big major movement. Nothing on the bearish side. However, look at Myers. Myers had 45% increase in the price from 20 cents to 29 cents, and the volume, usually the average volume over the week, over 50 week, is nearly 5 million shares. Well, look what happened on last week. 44 million shares were transacted, nearly 800%, 8 times more. So again, you need to actually take all that into consideration. If you have increase in the price, increase in the volume, there must be a reason. And that doesn't really happen one day and stops. Most of the time, it continues. So we're going to look at Myers this morning and see whether it's really worth trading Myers. If it goes up from 29 cents to 35 cents, that is a major increase. But you have to catch it early in the morning before the market really goes right through the day. Flexi Group, we are trading this one as well. We're making small profit. On the week, it was up nearly 17% with nearly double the volume, more than double the volume, 2.2%. Another company called Bubs Australia, I'm not familiar with that company. Paladin, data number 3, depends again whether these companies have got CFDs. If you're very aggressive, because that's what you probably do, but you can also go on as an investor. As an investor, I'd like you to see Myers up to 40, 50 cents in the next year or two. Again, that may be your trade. If you are very aggressive, you're probably looking from 29 cents to 33 cents in the next week or two. Again, that is the variety between the various strategies and the various risk appetite that you both have, all of you have. So now we look at the daily. On the daily, so I showed you that was actually the weekly, sorry, I meant to mean the weekly, and that was the daily. That was actually the 50 days. So I misled you. These are actually the daily volume, not the weekly. These are the volume for the weekly. And if by the way, if you want a copy of this, all you have to do is call us and we'll send you a copy of that presentation. As a matter of interest, over the last 52 weeks, what we've seen, this company, Alliance Resources, had the highest price in the last 52 weeks. The high was 28 cents, the low was 12 cents over 52 weeks, and it finished on Friday at 14.5 cents, but during the last 52 weeks it reached the highest point. So again, why it got up to 28 cents and now back to 14.5 cents, again, that's an issue. We only look at the ones with the blue color on it because they are above 10 cents. We never like to trade anything below 10 cents, so don't worry about Enterprise Metals. And now looking at Spectrum Rare Earth, that's the highest price over the last 52 weeks. But if you look at the last 52 weeks, hardly changed. The low during the 52 weeks was 16 cents, the high 16 cents, hardly any movement. So we're not going to worry about that at all. I'm looking for companies that have the highest price at the end of the week, and that is actually the highest price over the last 52 weeks, and compare it with the low and look at the change. Nothing here, by the way, the changes happen to be very small. The changes happen to be very small. Again, on the 52-week lows, you've got some companies here, Red Hill, Transmetro. Nothing really interests me here. In terms of upcoming dividends. ResMed is giving you 4 cents. That is actually 6.6% yield, not really a great deal. Macquarie Bank giving you 4% yield is going to pay you $1.80 and 40% franked. Premier Investment 34 cents, 4.5. Joyce Corporation. And by the way, I also like to give you the companies that offering you major yield. Janus Henderson, if you heard this company, Joyce Corporation, Premier Investment 4.6%, and so on. These are the companies which we are trading at the moment on CFDs. We've got an open position, very small position on the ASX 200. We're trading big way on ANZ Bank and Westpac. So we rely on these banks to recover in the next few weeks. As I told you, we're trading Flight Centre and we're making a bit of profit on it. We're also trading Flexi Group. We're making a small profit on it. Cube Logistic had good volume. We traded based on volume, but then it disappointing $35 loss. West African Resources, another loss of 445. But for these trades, we are relying heavily on the two banks to recover today. Now, before I close, the presentation was prepared for general information only and does not take into account the investment objectives, financial situation, and particular needs of your case. Person intending to act on information on this document should seek professional advice, and you need to confirm that the investment or strategies mentioned are appropriate in the light of the particular investment needs, objective, and circumstances. At FS Securities, our trading decisions are based on technical analysis, I've told you, and whilst the charts are showing the trend, additional analysis may need to take to find out if the trend is no longer your friend. Remember, the trend is your friend until the end, and of course the charts show you the trend but do not always show you the end. If you have any question to ask, all you have to do is ask. So how do you ask questions? Well, you write to me, George, at FS Securities. FS stands for full service. George at fssecurities.com.au. And if you want to ring my mobile, I'm available 7 days a week, 11 hours every day. You put 61, that's the country code. If you're ringing my mobile from overseas, 61, you don't need the 0, 61 411 259526. All I can tell you now, happy trading, and I hope you make some money this week.